Hi, welcome to this episode of Monopoly in Real Life. Hey, have you ever considered buying an investment property? So here's the deal. You're going to want to stay tuned to this episode, right? I have a client that recently closed a purchase for her and her husband on their primary home. And now they're looking, and they have a rental already. So they have a rental home, primary home, and now they're looking into the future about buying their next rental. So she's been watching the Monopoly in Real Life, and she said, hey, can I talk to you about how we strategize for that next purchase? And I'm like, perfect. I said, hey, would you mind if I made an episode out of it? And she said, absolutely. So in this episode, I'm going to share with her things that my wife and I have learned over almost 30 years of investing in real estate on being a landlord and how to handle some of these purchases as well as the move outs. And then there are some tricks in here if you're even a tenant on how you move out. So you're going to want to stay tuned. It's a great episode. It's perfect for that person who's thinking about long-term wealth building in real estate. So here's the deal. I'm going to go right into the call, and we're going to jump right in. So I'm going to let you lead with your first question, or your first part of the conversation.
So just as a person who purchased our first rental home like 6 or 7 months ago, what kind of things should I be looking at as I plan to purchase another home in about 3 years and turn our existing home into our second rental? What kind of questions should I be asking you or asking myself?
Well, and so keep in mind, as part of this conversation, we're going to talk to your CPA eventually, because that's really going to be the bigger picture for you. Because I'm not a CPA, don't play one on TV. But I do have experience in this realm, so we can talk about that stuff. It really comes back to you got to have a 3-year, a 5-year, and a long-term goal. So I think you've kind of laid out your short-term goal, which is to pick up another rental, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So right now, what I would be looking at is how are you going to make that next rental purchase happen? Because depending on how you structure your lifestyle, I have some clients who move every few years, and what they do is they leave the departing residence as their future rental property. They've designed a life around that. Now, not everybody can design a life around moving every few years. So is your intention with the home you're staying in right now for it to become the future rental, or is this your kind of long-term, home, for the foreseeable future?
That's a really good question. And so the answer is I don't know.
Okay.
We live now in Lake Stevens. We want to stay in Lake Stevens while our son finishes school. He's in 4th grade right now, so we've got a commitment to this area, and we're also very, very happy up here too. But I guess my assumption was it's easier for us to qualify for another mortgage if we go ahead and move, since that's what we did the first time. But is that a true statement?
So the issue of buying a home is always, a primary residence always has the best guidelines, if you will. Minimum, okay. the less down payment, the requirements are less. So to give you an idea, like for you to vacate the home you're in and use it as a rental, because we have rental history, we can start looking at getting a lease together when you're at that stage. We can look at getting a lease together and a security deposit and be able to use that income to offset the existing or the departing residence. And then we look at what your next purchase is and what guidelines apply. But easily you could look at doing a conventional 5% down when we get to that next purchase, because it's going to be a primary home. So it gets treated as a primary home. The one you're leaving gets treated as a departing residence. That would then become part of your investment pool. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, it does. So like, to make that a really simple statement, it's easier to move every couple of years as opposed to like seeing a piece of property that I would like to turn into a rental and not moving if we don't have a lot of capital. We've got great credit and all that kind of stuff, but is that true? It's easier for us to obtain a loan if we're going to move?
Yes.
Okay.
The easy number is lower down payment, i.e. potentially 5% down versus 25% down purchase down payment on an investment property.
That's a huge difference.
That's a huge difference. I don't know anybody who saves that kind of money every couple of years.
That's great. That pretty much, because that was our intention, but I really didn't know why.
That's the biggest takeaway. And then when we go to talk to your CPA, he may have you know, maintaining your existing residence for a minimum of 2 years to be able to capitalize on the primary residence before moving into the next one. So again, that's a CPA answer.
Okay.
Okay, so I would, you know, as an investor myself, I would always look at 2 years minimum as a threshold, and then looking at what that next purchase would be. Now, again, having a child in school limits your market, but it doesn't limit it that much. There's always going to be a property that comes on the market that may work for you.
Right, right. And it actually helps because if we can narrow down where we want to be, then we'll just wait it out. Because moving from where we did to here, we had a really big open range, and I don't know if it made it harder in a way to just really not know where we were going to end up purchasing a home. I guess maybe emotionally it was a little harder than anything, but yeah, we're willing to wait it out to get that next location that will feel like home. So.
Well, and again, that next purchase could be a longer term purchase, or it could just be part of the cycle that you're into. You know, so there's a lot of options. The other thing is being in the neighborhood. Like you said, sometimes it's a curse to have too many options.
Right.
So being
yeah, a little confusing.
Well, there's just too many, you know, too many things, too many variables, too many things that make you think about things that, you know, if you're going to stay in the school district, well, you've just taken that and limited it down to a certain shopping area.
Yeah.
And since you're in that mode, you're already going through neighborhoods. And this is one of the things I always talk to people about. Being in that environment where you have too many options sometimes gets overwhelming. Whereas now you know specifically what school districts you want to stay in, makes it so much easier for you to go shopping.
Yeah.
And I know you have a good agent, so you know when you're at that stage, you go back to that great realtor who helped you with this purchase to say, I want to define my search area to this location because we're looking at our next home.
Great. So that actually leads me to another thought, which is being in the neighborhood. I have found a property that looks amazing, and you know, I had a client of mine suggest, well, why don't you write those people a letter and just say, hey, you know, if you're ever interested in selling, could you give me a call? We are about 2 years at least out from making that move, but would that be something that you would suggest?
Absolutely. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, even when you look at it 2 years from now, planting that seed, and I would go one step further and I'd actually make it somewhat of a marketing campaign where I would send them at least something every 3 to 4 months, you know, introducing your family, introducing why this piece of property is so attractive to you, so that you now have opened that door. And again, you're still probably going to need a realtor when you get to that stage of making that purchase happen, but at least you've already sucked up the purchase. Right? So you've already locked up the property before it actually hits open market, which puts you in the driver's seat.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's great. That's good, and a good idea, too, to touch base every few months, not overwhelm them or anything like that, but maybe share a little bit of our vision, our family. We're expanding our family through foster care and things like that, and it's just a great piece of land. So, okay, good.
Well, and you know, Catherine, don't miss that right there. I mean, what you just said right there, just it speaks volumes to a potential seller, because keep in mind, they own this, they live there, they're emotional about it. It's their home, and knowing that it's going to provide you know, that next home for somebody else, and the foster care aspect. I mean, you can't ask for a better letter and a better future buyer of your home.
Nice. Okay, great.
You know, and after you send the letter, you know, maybe you've sent it once or twice. You know, it's kind of stalkerish, so I'll let you weigh it out. But maybe you knock on the door one Saturday and just introduce yourself person to person.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of times there isn't a personal connection. And I've got dogs barking in the background, so the phone is ringing, so...
That's all right.
Edit that part out. Come here, guys, come here! But just in, you know, having it be more personable, I like that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that speaks volumes, especially in a competitive market. Being able to put your foot in the door first and foremost, it just sets you apart from the average buyer who's out there.
Nice. Okay, great.
So, it's a couple of things we think about, when we talk about the rental thing, is your long-term investment strategy on it. The tax code is ever changing, so this is where I always go back to talking to your financial planner and your CPA. They're going to be the most knowledgeable on what's going on in the marketplace with investment properties. One of the things we try to do with ours is, when we bought them, there's all these conversations about, well, should we do a 15-year because we want to pay it off sooner versus a 30-year? And I'm just such a firm believer we don't know what the future holds, and the market rates are so compact. There's not a lot of difference between a 15-year rate and a 30-year rate, but the payment is dramatically different. So I'm a firm believer in signing up on a 30-year note because your payment's less, but pay it like you want to pay it off in 20 years, or pay it like you want to pay it off in 15 voluntarily. Because you can expedite the payoff and save yourself years on your mortgage just by doing more principal pay downs. And a couple ways you see that are, adding more principal pay down to each monthly payment. Just adding an extra $150 a month has a dramatic offset on the long term of your loan. I typically say try to squeeze in one extra payment a year, and where you see that in marketing materials, all the big guys out there doing the marketing say, well, you should set up for every 2-week payments. Well, if you think about that, a bi-monthly payment, what that does is it adds you another payment through the year. If you're making bi-weekly payments, so if you're making payments every 2 weeks, you're adding a payment in for the year, right? So you're splitting your payment up, but you're adding in one more monthly payment by the time the year's over.
Nice. That's a good strategy.
Yeah, so that's a great long-term strategy to help kind of pay that loan off quicker, because, we're all looking at that horizon. The reason we put in for the pain and suffering of being a landlord is because we're hoping to use those funds someday in retirement.
Definitely.
So everybody's got a different window when it comes to retirement. So that's why I say, I'm a firm believer in setting it up for a 30-year note, paying it off with whatever schedule you want to pay it off with, and obviously I can calculate what that would be. And the beauty is, that month where you don't have a tenant making the payment because they moved out, well, you can drop back to your minimum payment, right? Not kill the family budget.
Right.
And then when you get the new tenant in, go back on that expedited schedule.
Nice. That's a great idea.
So that's what we try to do at our house.
Good. You do that with all your properties then? You just try to,
Yep.
to put it on, okay.
Yep.
Try to put it on that plan. That's good.
Yeah, and I've got some clients who use their tax return versus trying to spread it out throughout the year. It just depends on what works for your budget.
Right. Or being self-employed, I usually don't get a tax return. A tax refund, I get to pay in. So,
Exactly.
That wouldn't be our issue over here, but yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so like I said, that's one of the things we do. The other thing is, always make sure that you get your rainy day fund. From a mortgage standpoint, we've got to hit you with a vacancy of 3 months out of the year until we have a track record that we can use on tax returns. But if we're looking at the future, we're looking at, for someone who doesn't already own rentals and they're looking at buying one, we hit them for a 3-month vacancy throughout the year when it comes to the income qualifying. So I think that's not a bad rule of thumb if you think about your rental pool to kind of budget for 3 months of vacancy. They're not all going to be vacant at the same time, but there's nothing wrong with making sure you have a rainy day fund when they do go vacant.
Definitely, because there would be nothing more impactful than just hurrying up and getting in the wrong person. That is not worth it at all, as opposed to just relaxing and knowing you have that rainy day fund to cover it.
Absolutely. Well, and again, the tenant moves out, and now you're putting in new vinyl, new carpet. There's another budget item that a lot of new landlords don't take into account. And a tenant flip could be $10,000. So between you and I would rather see you build up that account before you start putting more money on the mortgage of the rental.
So that's a great point. So we just put in not hardwood flooring, but laminate flooring throughout the house before we moved out. So we wouldn't have like carpet.
Okay.
We just painted the outside of the home. I didn't even consider move-out costs being that high. So without carpet, and I'm not thinking of anything else that's super big, what other things, what falls into that like $10,000
Well,
that you just said?
so I'm giving you some worst case because we've been here and done that. You've got to pay the attorney to evict them. And then once they go, if you're in an eviction, and we've only, knock on something hard, we've only had to evict 2 in 25 years. But they're the ones that come to mind, right? The interiors are trash, holes in the walls, holes in the doors. So unless you're handy, you got to pay subs to come in and fix the walls, retexture, repaint. I'll give you a little tidbit on doors because a lot of people don't realize this, and even landlords sometimes don't realize this. So like in Marysville, Frank Lumber, you can take the slab of the door, leave the jamb alone, but take the slab off on a door that's got a hole in it. Take the door to Frank Lumber. They'll match it. They'll put the new hinge. They'll copy the hinge locations and the door knob location. So when you pick it up, all you have to do is either spray it with laminate, or with with shiny, spray it with lacquer, right? Or paint it, depending on what's going on in your rental. But you want to put a finish on it, and then you just rehang it. You're not doing anything with the jamb. Ideally, the jamb's not broken out. If the jamb's broken out, they do have some jam repair kits out there. But what I find is, it's one thing to have to just replace the slab. It's a little pricier than what you would. Well, it's not that much pricier when you consider getting a pre-hung door and having to do it all. It's way cheaper, way quicker. You don't have to retrim it. You don't have to rehang it. It's just literally taking the hinges off, taking it to Frank Lumber, they match it, and then you just put the hinges back on and put it up.
That's great. That's good to know.
Yeah, we've used that, because again, for whatever reason, some tenants like to pop holes in doors. I have no idea why.
Right?
But, sheetrock.
We don't want to know why. But.
Yeah. Well, at least they're not hitting the kids or the spouse, I guess, so we'll go with that.
Exactly. So just in your years of experience, what other gems have you found other than Frank Lumber as places to go that have helped you get through like repairs and just upgrades and different things?
Well, I'm pretty handy, and my wife's in the interiors business, so when it comes to carpet, and the latest product I really like is, it sounds like you might have used this. It's not a laminate floor per se, but it's a luxury vinyl plank. It's actually a really good product, floats over everything, doesn't have a ticky-tacky, and it doesn't swell when it gets wet because it's actually vinyl instead of a presswood.
Nice.
Yeah, so that we've started retrofitting a lot of places with that product because it's super durable and you don't have to worry about it swelling if it were to get wet, and it doesn't have the same scratch issues, some other stuff. And it's easy to replace.
So you could replace like a section without having to bring up the whole floor in a room. Yeah,
it's a little tougher, and I ideally don't want to have to, but it goes together so fast. If you had to replace a whole room, it's pretty inexpensive and pretty quick to redo.
Wow. Okay. That's good to know too.
Yeah. So, and I'm pretty handy, so I tend to do my own sheetrock repairs. I do my own texture, depending on the situation. If it's a whole unit repaint, we might do it, or we might, we've got some pretty good painter contacts. We would have them come in and do it professionally. Normally, what would happen is every so many years we have it done professionally, and in between we do it ourselves. I'll tell you a couple paint tricks. Always use the same interior paint for your rentals. So invest in whatever paint company you like, but get the same color, a stock color. We use accessible beige on just about everything because it's easy to replicate. It's a good warm color. So when you go in, and the Magic Sponge, do you know what the Magic Sponge is?
I don't know what that is.
So everybody should have the Magic Sponge under their sink. It's who's the guy with the white T-shirt?
Mr. Clean?
Mr. Clean Magic Sponge.
Oh, okay.
This thing is, I don't know what it does, what chemicals are in it, but this thing is amazing. We have them under, we have a plethora of them. but they're great. Literally, you get a smudge on a wall. You want to clean the appliances. I go to this first because it cleans up so much that you don't have to repaint. So it's a great, make sure it's in your cleaning bucket.
Nice.
So the Mr. Clean Magic Sponge, firm believer in it. So like before I go paint, I'll take that and I'll wash a wall first to see if it's really bad or not. The worst thing that happens for us is when a client decides they want to go fix their own pinholes and they splatter spackle everywhere because now you have to, and so one of the takeaways is if you walk into your unit and they've tried to fix it, get out a wet sponge, not a Mr. Clean, but just a wet sponge or a rag, and wash off as much of the spackle as you can.
Okay.
It'll have dried by then, but you should be able to get it wet and wipe as much of it off as you can. Because what happens is, if you don't go back over that with Kilz or some other primer, it flashes through your new paint.
Oh, okay.
So you end up putting a primer on the wall. Now you end up painting the whole wall, whereas you might be able to just go in there and kind of dab a little bit of your, accessible beige in those particular spots.
Nice. And that's a great idea to not be flustered about, okay, which house has which paint, or, you could leave it in the basement or whatever, but to just have one color, I like that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's saved us, because we don't have to think anymore, right? It's just we know what color's in there. If we allow a tenant to paint a wall, which we very rarely do, we know that we're going to go in, we're going to put Kilz on the wall, and we know what paint we're putting back over it.
Nice.
So those are a couple of the quick turn things, After you get into this a little bit, there's always something you learn. And I'll tell you, in today's world, YouTube is so amazing. There's so many YouTube tricks out there to help navigate, sheetrock. How do I make this repair look right? YouTube's got 1,000 of them. How do I replace a door if I have to replace a jamb? All over the place. If I just want to do a jamb repair, no problem. If I want to replace a dishwasher, which if you don't have those kind of skills, because you got to be an electrician and a plumber, hire those things out, or really get into the YouTube and learn how to do it yourself. Because dishwashers go out over time, disposals go out over time, and we don't actually put disposals in any of our rentals.
How come?
Because they go bad. And tenants think that you can shove everything down there.
Right. Right. Yeah, good point.
So we don't put those in our rentals just for that reason. And again, we have some properties that are on septic, and you don't want to be putting that stuff out to your drain field.
Right. Absolutely. Good. It's a good perspective to see it from the landlord, even though I am a landlord. I don't, we're new at this, and so, I don't see it. I see it for more well, if we put the garbage disposal in there, it would be more convenient for the tenant, right? As opposed to from a business standpoint going, and then they're going to put everything under the sun, in there. So that's a good perspective.
Yeah, so, these are all things that we've learned over time.
That's good. Good. Well, another thought I'm having is, let's say we had 2 rentals and then our own mortgage. Would you suggest combining those 2 houses together so that you have one mortgage payment to cover both properties, or do you think it's safer to just keep them separate?
I like separation. We don't know what the future holds, so if you needed to sell one of those units in the future, you don't want it tied together with the other one.
That's true.
The other thing is your mortgage payment is not going to change dramatically by doing that. You're still going to have taxes and insurance on each independent unit that now you have to pay on your own, right, because they're not tied to a mortgage. And you would be hard-pressed to find a standard mortgage that would tie the 2 properties together. Now, a commercial lender would cross-collateralize the 2, but you're going to pay more interest if you go to a commercial lender to do that.
Okay, good. That's a good point.
So, yeah, not a fan of that. Nothing I would ever do.
Okay, good. Yeah, just, again, not knowing, just having lots of thoughts, well, that makes sense. Let's put them together, But, good.
Yeah, so I have a different question for you. Since you already have one rental, are you set up under an LLC?
We are not.
So one of the things you might consider, again, talking to your CPA, talk to an attorney, so you can't get a mortgage under an LLC, or very rarely can you get a mortgage under an LLC, but you can quitclaim the property to your wholly owned LLC without triggering a due on sale clause. Okay.
I don't know what that means, so I'm just trusting you. So can you explain that a little bit? I don't know what you just said.
Yeah. So if you create an LLC, a limited liability company, and quitclaim the property from you and your husband to the LLC that you and your husband are the only members of.
Got it.
You don't trigger what's called the due on sale clause. So in most mortgages now, if you transfer the property to, let's say you tried to sell it on a contract, it potentially would trigger a due on sale clause, which means the bank or the mortgage company wants to get paid tomorrow.
I see.
Okay. Whereas if it's just you and your husband in your own LLC, transferring the property to your LLC gives you that little bit of liability coverage that you don't currently have. So to give you an idea, something happens inside of your rental, you're coming back to just you and your husband's liability coverage.
Okay.
Right? So hard to paint a picture that would be terrible, but it's not expensive. It gives you one more level of liability coverage, so that if something were to happen in that unit, someone outside trips and falls, they've got to sue your LLC before they come after you personally.
I see. Okay. Okay, good. So we would just, obviously talk to our CPA, set up the LLC, which is a little bit of money, and then rotate the properties underneath that. Would you put any other assets? I'm trying to think. We just have vehicles.
No. So the idea is to transfer the rental property to an LLC. Now I have some buddies of mine who will put all their rentals in the same LLC. I have some buddies who create an LLC for each rental. Their purpose for that is literally just to limit liability. So the only thing that they should be able to come after, if you treat the LLC truly like an LLC and truly like a company, is the only thing they should be able to come after are the assets in that LLC.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, so you don't want to put anything in there you don't want to lose, and you don't want to tie up anything under an LLC that you shouldn't tie up. And the idea literally is, it's just like the name says, limited liability company.
Okay. Yeah, I don't really understand that, but I understand the basics of what you're outlining. So you would just put it over the property as an additional, like, umbrella or something, another between me and if something happened.
It's actually transferring the ownership. You are transferring the ownership from you personally to your LLC.
Okay.
Right? So it's just like transferring this property to a corporation you might own. Different business structures go from basically a sole proprietor to an LLC to a corporation, S Corp, and then a C Corp. So those are different up the ladders. So the idea is that property now belongs to that LLC. Okay. Okay, that makes sense, because I've looked at that for my own personal business, but it hasn't been necessary. But that makes more sense. So it would. Okay. And if you're doing anything that has any kind of liability to it, LLC is super cheap to set up. And obviously I have a couple good attorney friends I can set you up with to help you with that. But if you're doing anything that has a liability impact to it, everything I do as a business person would be set up under an LLC. Okay.
Good. That's good advice too. I like this conversation because it's going directions and going in areas I never thought.
Well, and that was what I was hoping. I do want to thank you again for opening yourself up for the conversation if this does become an episode. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm even thinking, if you go back and you edit it or whatever and you want to redo a part, or I'm totally open to that, because I think a lot of good information came out of this to help a lot of people.
Yeah, well, and Catherine, it was one of the reasons I thought this would be a great opportunity. So I want to thank you again for prompting the call by giving me a call after watching the Monopoly in Real Life videos. I know they're a little, what's the best way to say, elementary for where you're at right now, but I thank you for weighing in on them and giving me some input. But this, I think, is great, and like I said, I just want to thank you for putting yourself through this and let me hopefully make an episode out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to help.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the help from you. We couldn't have done this without your guys' help. You guys were amazing.
Well, thank you.
Fun the second property. So.
Well, and I look forward to helping you with that next one. So.
Absolutely. Good. All right.
All right, Catherine. Well, have a great afternoon. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So I hope you got the gist out of that. There's a couple real nuggets in there about how to treat that next purchase in real estate if you're looking at long-term investment and long-term wealth building. So remember, if you ever have any questions for me, feel free to give me a call. Let's talk. Who knows? Maybe it'll build into another episode for you. Look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Monopoly in Real Life.